Well, again, here we are once more. Another week has gone by. We're going to continue our micro-learning sessions on the economics of the managed technology service provider. We have a pretty good session here today. I think it's going to be something that we've wanted to add to this and really just kind of have a section to talk about core recurring revenues. Kind of not what we always think about when we want to run out and gain recurring revenues as a core philosophy. We also have the ability to kind of stack recurring revenues, and we should have these type of items in our toolbox. So we're going to talk about a couple of those today and what they can do for your business, what they have done already time and time again for other TAG members that have built a nice recurring revenue stream from these types of activities. And we'll go over that in detail here today. Today, we're going to talk about the core recurring revenues of hosted voice and SIP trunks. We're going to get into that, give you at least an overview of some of these things you can kind of have in that toolbox, aside from just our IT business that we're obviously seeking to grow for the most part. We have quite a few folks coming from the OE space on these calls. And typically, we're selling voice coming out of the office equipment space. In some cases, we're not selling voice yet. And really, IT is the focus because it's high dollar, it's high complexity, and certainly a profitable business to be in. So we want to kind of start with that respect is we don't have a voice aspect to our business, or if we just have it kind of as an add-on, we want to talk about it as, give it the importance that it needs to have when it comes to putting it into our business mix. So I kind of wanted to ask these questions here. I mean, are we really seeking only our customers' IT business? Ultimately, that's what we want to get. The IT space is kind of the elephant among the disciplines, because if we have the IT, we typically have the ability to own a lot of the other technology in the business if we have the capacity to deliver it. So I wanted to start off today with asking these two next questions, which is, what are we really seeking here? When we think about what we want, typically the knee-jerk reaction is, well, we want to grow sales. We want to find new customers. We want to sell more. Yeah, that's true. But ultimately, we're trying to sell as much as we can, but we also want to be as profitable as we can on the items that we are selling. And so what is truly important here? And what I think we really want to talk about is the two most important things that we're really trying to get to in our end game. Ultimately, we want to own all the technology from our customers if we can. This is a slow process. Obviously, we don't currently sell everything to everybody, but that is kind of the idea. We'd like to own all their technology, so when they have an issue with any of these items or they have a need in any of these areas, that they're going to come to us first. If it's IT, which we obviously want to have, telephony, office equipment, and in there, imaging and managed print, surveillance, physical security, those technologies that are not project-based in nature, usually, like we also have another one of structured cabling, which a lot of our members do, but these are the ones that are kind of ongoing needs that our customers might have. Now, we may only be doing business in one or two of these at this point, but certainly we would like to be the first call when our customer has a need for anything else. The thought is being all things tech to our customers is really the most sticky. Why is that? It prevents other technology providers from getting that foot in the door. So if we're doing the IT, but we don't do the voice or we don't do the surveillance, potentially those other providers certainly have the ability to come in and potentially talk to our customer about those solutions. What's the easiest sale in the world? And I think we all know it's to our existing customers. It's a warm lead. It's a customer who's already going to take your call. They know you, they like you, they trust you. So what's to prevent let's say a provider that does all things tech, that's doing some surveillance and physical security, to come in and bid for your customer's IT business or for your customer's voice business. This is a tall bar to hit, but if we can, we want to be the MTSP to the customer. That's why we don't say we're an IT provider. We don't say we're an MSP. We'd like to be technology agnostic, like I had explained in the I think the first course we did. We want to be a managed technology service provider. We want to manage all your technology. We may not be there yet. We may not have any ability at this point to deliver voice if we haven't gotten into that. Or maybe you have the capability to deliver voice, but you really have not touched surveillance, physical security, or any of those other technologies. And that's okay. But ultimately, if we can be that trusted partner, that trusted technology partner, not just another vendor, then that's where we're in the best position with our customers. We're a partner almost to them and help them run their business. All their technology runs like clockwork because we're there. They don't have 3 or 4 vendors that, one company taking care of the office equipment, another one does their IT, another one does their phones, another one does, provides surveillance or security if they have it. All those vendors, if we could be that, all 4 of them in one, obviously that's better for the customer, cements our relationship there. And it does prevent the opportunity for other vendors that might have a foothold in IT or voice or any of these other disciplines from getting their nose under the tent, ultimately. When we asked what was important and what are we really trying to get to, I'd say the first thing is we want to be on a path to be a technology provider to our customers. And maybe we're not there yet, but that's the goal. That's what's important here is we want to be able to have these offerings for our members for this reason and be an MTSP, be a technology provider, and be able to deliver as much of the technology needs of our customers as we possibly can. Makes sense. So that's one thing. And then the second thing that's important that we're really seeking is this. We are seeking nirvana. Remember, this is kind of our joking definition of where do we kind of hit our stride in the business? Where do we start kind of hitting the hockey stick on the profit curve where we ultimately become, all of a sudden, everything we do becomes more profitable. And it's nirvana. It comes from being laser focused on building recurring revenue streams wherever and whenever we can find them. Not everything we're going to sell is going to lend itself to a recurring revenue stream. We know that. But wherever we can turn what was a sale one time into some sort of recurring revenue, we try to take every opportunity where it's possible. And nirvana is this. It's when that recurring revenue meets and exceeds the cost covering the cost of all the cost in the business, but for product purchases, for resale. When we hit that stage, we jokingly called it, that's when we're at nirvana in our business. We can do no wrong. It is the number one metric for enduring financial success in this industry because every single tag member that's exceeded 20% EBITDA, and we have several that are in the mid 30s at this point, it all comes down to this. They basically stacked recurring revenues wherever they could, and they got to this stage, and it makes everything they do, if you recall from our first couple of conversations, it makes everything you do above this point a lot more profitable. You go out and sell one more hour of labor, you've essentially already covered all of your technician salaries with that recurring revenue, so you essentially put 100% of that to the bottom line. Or you go out and sell one more phone system. Ultimately, the cost is covered until you hit critical saturation where you got to hire more people. And every additional sale, every marginal sale above this stage where we get to nirvana is a lot more profitable. And that's why the people that are your peers in this group that are making sometimes 2 or 3 times more than you are, why is that? They've attacked their mix. They've spent the hard years building recurring revenue and have gotten to that point. And every single person on this call and every other single person in TAG can get to the exact same place. And one of the ways we do it is to incorporate these core recurring revenues that really should be part of every person's tool set into our offerings. as we're chasing the kind of the shinier object of the high dollar, high complexity IT business, we should be also looking at SIP trunkage, hosted voice, firewall and access points, what I call kind of edge security as a service, and SD-WAN. So all of these provide solid recurring revenues, and these can easily be incorporated and be sold to any customers for IT or any other products that you sell. And these can be offered any of your prospects. Ultimately, these help build that structure of recurring revenue, incremental. Every sale is bringing additional progress towards that stage we want to get to that we jokingly call nirvana. For all of these, embracing that small bundled in recurring revenues really does speed us on our path to nirvana. And the thing that's nice about these is it's very low incremental cost. They're what I like to say is low touch. The ultimate low touch add-on item that we basically got free money for in our past, especially for IT and telephony vendors, was connectivity. For a long time, there were high commissions involved with going in, setting up a customer with their broadband internet connectivity. And the fact that we did that, typically we got what I call mailbox money, which is the connectivity carriers essentially would send us a commission check every month. And did we have any cost in that to support that revenue? No, it was just a commission. We're not in the connectivity business. We're typically not the person they're going to call unless they're an MSP customer, and we're tasked with doing that. Typically, the carriers just send us a check as a commission, and we really don't have to do anything for it. Maybe help them troubleshoot an issue, but usually that's not our responsibility. And it's essentially free money. And aside from a possible commission expense to someone who sold it within our staff, there's really no cost, typically. So we get the check, let's say in a quarter, we get $10,000 of connectivity commissions. There's no cost to that. We might have to write a check to compensate our salesperson, but it's 80 or 90% pure profit. Now, not everything on this list is similar to that. Obviously, hosted voice typically has a service component. Firewalls and SD-WAN may have a service obligation as well. If something goes wrong, you're the first line of defense, but it's very small and there's not a lot of ongoing support. It is what I like to call low incremental cost, fair to high margins with low touch, meaning once it's in place, you typically don't have a ton of cost to maintain it. So we're going to talk about the first two today briefly, give you some examples, give you some ideas of what this typically does, and we'll answer some questions. So we'll talk about SIP, we're going to talk about hosted voice, and then next week we're going to wrap up this topic talking about the other two of SD-WAN and some hardware and firewall as a service that we have available, and what those economics are compared to, let's say, for example, taking a firewall and putting it on a service plan where you're getting a monthly recurring on it rather than selling it outright to the customer. And that's another good way to build some easy, low-touch recurring revenue. So we'll talk about those next week. That'll be the last of anything touching telephony or any other IT surveillance, some of these projects, hourly rates, all those things are kind of going to be past us and we'll be finished. And then the following week, which actually I believe is after the holiday, is when we're going to start our dive into the IT space. With that being said, we'll kind of continue on here and talk a little bit about SIP, and I'm going to kind of give us, for anybody on the call that's not terribly familiar with telephony, give you a little bit of background on it. SIP trunking stands for Session Initiation Protocol, and really just enables that voice services over the internet. And it's essentially a virtual phone line that we do rather than what we think of in our youth when telephony meant copper wires, the old PSTN type of lines. And so these can be done with any PBX. It can be hosted or it can be on premise. You're typically going to have SIP trunks to support your voice over IP for any telephony you sell these days. When we bundle that with a premise-based voice system, which Some folks getting into telephony today are really seeking just a hosted voice solution that may or may not ever have the ability, or not the ability, but the desire to get into premise. But you may have customers from time to time that do need a premise solution. So it's not something that you should dismiss out of hand. You'd like to have the ability to do both, although doing premise-based installation and configuration of phone systems is obviously a little more time-intensive than installing hosted. If you're doing a kind of a retail SIP trunkage, they're going to pay the SIP trunking company for the connectivity, and we're going to get a 15-20% commission. That's typical in the industry. They also have the ability to sell wholesale trunks, which you can bill any price yourself, bundle it into your own offering on a wholesale basis, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. Typically, the SIP trunk provider is going to bill the end user, or these can be sold to the dealer wholesale. This is very similar to connectivity commissions on the internet side, or for those of you that have ever received those, there's really not any after the fact service or support. Those commissions, when they arrive, you get a check in the mail, and it is significant in the fact that once you sell it, you get that commission. You really are not going to carry much in the way of cost to support it. Now, the tag members that have a track record in voice, that have been selling premise with SIP, they've been selling hosted, and you can sell hosted in a manner where you do separate the SIP trunks, and I'll explain how that works in a moment. But you can sell it with hosted, sell it with premise, and there are significant folks with at least our providers that we have a partnership with, it's Clearfly, and we have several members that have built significant recurring revenue streams by we're putting in the SIP with every system we sell, and some of those have built 5-figure or more recurring revenues with virtually no cost from selling the SIP trunkage on the phones that they're selling anyway. So it's not a small dollar amount. You think of this as if you have $120,000 of straight up recurring revenue coming in just from this, it's incredibly impactful to your overall profitability. Now, it takes a while to build that, obviously, because you got to put a lot of seats out there. But when you get into this business, it does, over time, it stacks those recurring revenues. You sell it once, you're going to get a recurring commission on the SIP trunks for as long as that customer is with you. It's certainly not selling phone systems and selling hosted voice does not generate the overall dollars of profit that a full service IT solution with all the bells and whistles is going to build, but it is a very, very profitable and robust source of recurring revenue. Switching over to hosted voice, the first thing I want to say is that hosted voice is a big world. There are 1,000 ways to skin this cat. There are more hosted providers out there these days than you can shake a stick at. They all have different structures of how it works, whether they're a retail solution or a wholesale solution. They pay these large spiffs. Some pay a commission after the fact. Some pay up front. You have certain vendors where you own the customer, and certain vendors that you kind of turn it over. You get a commission, but they essentially own that customer from that point on, and that's caused issues. So there's all kinds of solutions out there that have different economics. They have different benefits. Some are very simple solutions. It's a basic phone, you plug it in. Others have more robust solutions that are really beneficial to the business because they have a lot more functionality. And there's everything in between. Like I said, there's a million ways to sell this. We're going to focus on 2 examples here today. And I think depending on who on this call is already involved in the voice world, is already selling, probably we're all selling something a little different. And if you have some questions on this with what you're doing, it probably will take a few of those, but it'd probably be best to take those offline, just because what any one person is selling is typically not going to be what the other is selling. So we want to kind of keep those separate. But I am going to show you a couple examples that'll kind of give you an idea of what the possibility is with hosted voice. And the message here is, once it's sold, as long as you're with a solid company that has solid income potential. There's not a ton of support after the fact usually. Not a trick to it in terms of what you do right or wrong, other than selecting the right provider from the get-go. Really, the message is just get out there and sell it. Build your recurring revenues as quickly and as robustly as possible. Lots of solutions out there, a million ways to do it. Some are great, some are not. We have opinions on everything, and we'll share those with you, of course. But ultimately, it's let's get a recurring revenue from the telephony of our customers. If we're not already, we need to have this in our toolbox. We need to have this as part of the product set that we're offering our customers. Very high level, and again, there's 1,000 ways to do this, but very high level, it's going to be sold one or two ways. You're going to have retail bills the end user, a retail solution where the carrier bills the end user. In this scenario, the SIP trunk is not an issue because the carrier is providing the SIP trunk. They're selling a full service solution, hosted solution with a SIP trunk to your end user. So you don't need to worry about SIP trunkage in this scenario. And you typically will get just a commission on the back end. The dealer gets a commission on the total bill. The carrier, whether it's Xoltus, Pulsar 360, or NEC, or ShoreTel, or any of these guys that have hosted solutions, ultimately they're just going to bill the customer and they're going to write you a check after it's all said and done. You may still be the first line of support. Like if something goes wrong with your solution or they got an issue, they may call you first. So you have some minor service obligation to that, but it's typically, again, very, very small. And the industry standard is typically 20% commission. So whatever the customer is getting billed, you get a 20% check in most cases. The two providers that we have partnerships with the tag, it's 25%. And I think there are some others in the marketplace that are doing roughly 25% commission. That's pretty much what you can expect, is about 20-25% of the bill coming back to you as your income. Now, again, very high level. The other way you can do it is a wholesale solution where you're billing the customer. So now you're not getting a small check of whatever the commission amount is. You're billing for the entire amount. Let's think of it this way. If the carrier was billing a customer $100 and you got a check for $20, you're going to record the income as $20 in hosted voice commissions. If you're billing wholesale, you're the one billing the $100 and you have $100 of sales hitting your P&L. But then you have the cost of the hosted seat, potentially the cost of the SIP trunk, potentially the billing costs and any other items that might flow into that. And ultimately, you're going to end up in the same ballpark, we believe, although selling wholesale is certainly more profitable than just doing the straight commission route, as we're going to show you in just a moment. So the wholesale route, I want everybody to understand that sometimes it appears a lot more profitable because you're putting a lot more to your P&L, but that just means because you're putting 100% of the customer bill to revenue, whereas in the other scenario, you're just putting the commission amount, again, 20% of what you got, what the customer's paying is what's going to be your revenue. But ultimately, they're going to end up in the same ballpark. Rather than talk percentages, what I like to do is talk dollars to the dealer per seat, because that really tells us, rather than getting wrapped up in the mix of percentage, margin, or gross margin, or contribution, well, it's based on what top line. Is it on the commission side? On the commissions, you're probably going to get 80% is going to go to your bottom line, but obviously a lot less. So rather than getting into margin percentages when we're not sure what the top line that we're talking about in each of these two situations is, we're really just going to look at dollars to the dealer per seat, and that helps clarify rather than getting into a kind of a confusing percentage conversation. In a wholesale scenario, the dealer is going to purchase, or in some cases it's considered renting, the hosted seats from the provider on a monthly basis. The dealer is then going to purchase SIP trunks for the wholesale offering from a SIP trunk provider. That's one way to do it. Or you bill the customer for those hosted seats for the platform, and the SIP provider bills the end user directly. And there's a benefit to doing it that way in some cases as well, which we'll talk about. The dealer is going to bill the end user for all of this. And if you are purchasing wholesale SIP trunks from a provider and you are the one billing for those SIP trunks, you are going to also be paying the telecom taxes, collecting and remitting telecom taxes. Because guess what? If you are billing it, you are the carrier. We want to make sure we point this out. Whenever you're looking at a wholesale solution, always be aware of who is responsible for the telecom taxes. If you are invoicing the customer, in the eyes of the government, you are the carrier. You may be wholesaling any one of a number of products out there. There's Cordial, there's white label, there's things like reInvent, and they all have ways to address this. And some are good, some are a little risky. Know that if the invoice has your name on it, you are the carrier. Even if you're wholesaling a large company's offering, you are considered that carrier, which means that you are on the hook for the proper calculation, collection, and remission of those telecom taxes. Now, we always say this, just to be very careful with that. There's a lot of ways you can do this. In some cases, the carrier does it, calculates and remits it for you. So you hope that they're doing it right. There's companies out there that'll charge you a percentage of a small fee to essentially tell you what the telecom taxes are, and then you remit it. And that's all well and good. You have some coverage there. We have had in our past several TAG members that have gotten audited by the taxing authorities, and the penalties and various punishments and interest and all kinds of things, can be severe if it's not done right. And that is on you. So even if you have some assistance with calculating these taxes, or you're paying an outside service to do it, just know that if they don't do it right, unless you have complete indemnity where they're willing to step in front of you and the government's coming after you because your name's on the invoice. We just always want to have that caveat out there. If you're doing a wholesale billing, you want to be very careful about the telecom taxes and know your responsibility and know your risk. Just as a general philosophy, TAG thinks that there are less risky and just as profitable alternatives out there. Our position has been, we don't think it's worth a business worth getting into. And we would prefer, if it was up to us, we would do something different. That's not to say that there are many TAG members that do this that way, and they do it profitably, and they've not had any negative effects from it, and they're very happy with their choice. And that's okay. So there's folks that are doing that and doing it successfully. If we had to recommend, we would think that you could probably do it without that risk and be just as profitable, not have the hook into you for those telecom taxes and potential audits. But like I said, some folks are doing it and doing it quite well. We're going to get just a couple of examples here. And again, I always want to caveat this because it's a hard conversation to get into because there are a million ways to do it. So I'm going to just focus on two quick examples of a commission and then an example of one structure of a wholesale deal. For hosted voice commissions, where you're actually just letting the carrier bill your customer and they just send you a check at the end of every month of every quarter, and you're going to get that check at the end, after the customer pays the carrier and they collect it and remit you the commission. And I'm going to use just an average cost per seat. Let's say the customer is going to pay roughly $25 out the door with all the features, all the bells and whistles. If they have 20 seats and their bill is $500, we're going to say that's about on average with all the, maybe there's limited seats, maybe there's premium seats, maybe there's other features in there, that certain fees and things like that. Ultimately, that's what we always try to get down to, is that per seat cost. If the bill's $500, it's an average seat cost of 20 seats. It's going to give them a $25 average seat cost. If the bill's $500, you're getting a 25% commission, then you're going to get about $125 per seat. $125 total, about $6, a little over $6 a seat per month. So for every seat you put out there, you're going to get about $6.25 per seat per month for as long as that customer is out there in the world. 60 months, that's a fair amount of benefit to you. That's going to be about $7,500 over the course of 5 years. I want to put that in perspective because from our statistical history, obviously you have customers come and go, but hosted is pretty sticky. From the, almost 18 years of history that we've got selling hosted, even back when nobody knew what VoIP was, the average length of time that a customer will be on a hosted solution is 8 years. Some are much longer and some bail after 2 or 3. We get that. But on average, they're going to be with you for somewhere in the 7 to 8 year range once you sign them up, because it becomes like a utility bill. They pay it every month. And typically it's not something that turns over a lot unless there's problems with your platform, which again, you can go out and look for the lowest cost. You can go out and look for the most profitable solution potentially, but also remember that, are these guys going to stick around if the service is poor, if the platform is poor, and all those kinds of things. So you do have to balance. And what we try to do is to balance a very profitable solution with the best and most reliable solution for the end user. Because we believe that on average it's going to be well exceeding 6, 7, 8 years, let's look at what a 5-year economic benefit is to you. It's going to be about $7,500 for a 20 phone system once you sell it. So then in a wholesale scenario, you're going to have a little different. You're going to purchase the hosted seat from the provider. In most cases, the customer is going to pay you for the hosted platform. So you're going to bill them, whether you've got a Zoltus solution or some other wholesale solution. Typically, you're going to bill them. And what a lot of members do here is the SIP is billed, the telephony for the SIP trunks, and sometimes there's minutes involved and fax lines, is billed by the SIP provider directly. So you have 2 bills. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We'd like to have 1 bill, but if we have 1 bill, it makes us the carrier. What a lot of folks have done is they bill the customer for the hosted solution, the ongoing charges for the hosted solution. And the SIP trunk provider, like a Clearfly that a lot of our members use, will bill the member or bill the end user for the SIP trunkage, and they collect the telecom taxes. So it's okay, you've got 2 different bills, and you might end up with 3, because if let's say the company wants to buy the equipment and they put it on a lease, well then for 1 phone system, they've got a bill from the leasing entity, like a Balboa or a Great America or Leaf or Ascentium or whoever they may decide to use for that leasing. Then they get a second bill from you for the hosted solution, and then they get a third bill from a SIP trunk provider for the telephone lines. It's not ideal, but that's kind of what ends up happening in some cases, if the financing for the equipment if they want to do that. That's kind of what we see a lot of. If you buy the SIP trunks on a wholesale basis and you are the one billing to give that customer a single bill, then you do have you have to have the coverage of making sure you have very clear understanding of the calculation and the remission of the telecom taxes that you either have to do yourself or you have to pay someone to do for you, usually. Hosted voice solution, I want to give an example. And so what I'm going to do is just to give you an example of one of our partners, which is going to be the Zoltus Green Label with Clearfly SIP trunks. And then using the Clearfly has a unified billing as a service where Clearfly said, hey, we're going to bill the SIP trunks to your member and we're going to send you a commission. To your customer, and we're going to send you a commission. They developed a billing system and said, if we're going to bill for the SIP trunks, Mr. Tag member, we can also bill for your hosted solution, and we'll just remit you the money on the pass-through. So now you've got the customer getting a single bill. And again, this is just one option. There's 1,000 ways to sell SIP. There's 1,000 ways to sell a hosted solution combined with SIP. There's a lot of carriers out there. This is just one solution, and we like it. It's a little bit elegant because if Clearfly is going to bill for the SIP trunkage and collect the telecom taxes, they can bill for your hosted solution as well, and they can kind of white label your name and logo on it as well, so it does still look like it's coming from you. They charge for the service, but it does help in a couple ways, just because number one, it's a single bill for the solution and the SIP trunks. And then also, if they don't pay their Clearfly bill, they're going to get turned off because the phone lines will shut down. So there's leverage there. So you really don't have much in the way of danger that your customer is going to stop paying you, because you can essentially turn off those or Clearfly, if they don't get paid for the whole bill, it's going to certainly cut off service. It puts the collection burden on them, not you. maybe some marginal savings in administrative work to manage accounts receivable as well. Again, it costs money, but it's just the example I chose to use because it makes it a little easier to kind of run through this example. Remember that we did the commission example assuming that the customer was paying the carrier around $25 a seat. Let's assume that they're paying about the same $25 a seat in this scenario. In this scenario, we're thinking of it from a standpoint of the premium hosted seat, even though in most cases we're going to blend kind of the limited use and full use seats to kind of lower the cost. Let's assume they're all going to be premium seats. And between what they pay for the SIP trunks and they pay for your hosted solution, it's going to be all together on one bill. And let's assume it's around the same $25 a seat. How does it all play out? Well, we're going to have about $10.50, or we're going to have $10.50 for the hosted seat. We're going to have roughly $4 to $5 for the SIP trunk after the commission cost is remitted back to you. A billing fee of about $1. The total cost running up about $16.75. Rather than talk percentages, we want to talk the gross margin to the dealer. We were going to make about $6.25 selling it on a commission basis. We're going to make about $8.50 per seat per month selling it on a wholesale basis. These numbers can change a little bit because we are going to blend seats and every seat might not be $10.50. However, for the limited seats, at least on the Zoltus side, and I know a lot of other carriers do tiered pricing for what they call limited seats versus premium seats. So you'll have a blend, but you're typically going to make a little less on those anyway. So your cost will be lower, but you're going to charge the customer a little less. What we're giving here is a very broad example. Your results may vary, but you're going to make a little bit more doing a wholesale solution than you are if you just take the 20 or 25% commission and run. It is a little bit more profit for you. However, because you are the biller, you're doing it on a wholesale basis, it's a little more work for you. On the other side of the coin, when you do the commission, you set it up, you get the check, and there's not as nearly as much. You're not doing any billing work. You're maybe taking some phone calls if there's any support obligations, but you're not doing, it's fairly simple. So for those of you that are just getting into voice for the first time, it's an easy first step. And it's not that hard to convert once you get into it. If you're doing let's say a provider gives you a commission and then you want to move to a wholesale type of arrangement, most have the ability to do both. Most carriers, at least the higher value carriers, will do both for you. So you can start slow and kind of get into a wholesale billing later if you so chose. What does that do for you? Remember the other one, we said, hey, if we did this for 60 months on 20 phones, it's going to yield us about $7,500. Well, we're going to make 25% more doing it this way. The same 20 seats over 60 months is going to yield us about $10,000. And again, every deal is going to be a little different. They're going to have mixes of seats, mixes of cost, but this is kind of a good middle of the road example of what's going to happen. Last couple of quick examples, and I'm going to open it up for questions, is to look at what happens to our recurring revenue and our margin on a run rate. Because remember, we sell it once and this is recurring revenue. It's going to, ideally, if we sell one of these a month, we're going to stack some revenue. In a case of, let's say we're getting just a straight commission from a carrier, we're going to use the 25% that is available from both Zoltus and Pulsar 360, and rather than 20%, and that's going to yield you about that $6.25. And what I wanted to do was say, well, what if we're able to sell a couple of these a month? If we sold 50 seats a month, that's conservative because that really represents one large or maybe two medium-sized customers a month. It's one or two per month, but we want to look at it as a per seat basis. So if we're able to do, it's not a small amount, but it's not necessarily unreasonable to think that we could put in 50 seats a month if we're really marketing it to our existing customers and we're out there looking for new customers for our hosted solution. And what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get $312 a month when we sell the first 50 seats, and that's going to stack. Every month, we're adding $312 to our recurring revenue. This does build up over time because after 24 months, you're going to have $7,500 a month in recurring revenue coming in commissions. That's an annual run rate at that point in time of $90,000 a year. And this is virtually cost-free recurring revenue. There's not a lot of aftermarket, after the sale support costs that you have to run once you've got this money in hand. You have $90,000 a year. You may have commission expense to someone who sold it, but that's really going to be your only really measurable expense. Maybe a little bit of support hours here and there, but you're going to pay those technicians anyway. Ultimately, you typically have to grow a lot of hosted before you need to expand your service department to support them. Plus, if you sold the equipment, we'd always recommend looking into provided equipment if you can, but that usually means you're going to have to invest money of your own money and cash flow into buying equipment and then renting it to your customer. That's a whole nother model. It's cash intensive, but it's certainly the most profitable way you can do it. But for most of us, we're going to either have the customer buy the phones from us, or they're going to put it on a lease and we're going to get paid from a leasing company. And I just did a real ballpark. If we're selling that many seats, we'll probably have $1,500 to $2,000 a month in one-time margin from the sale of that equipment for those sales. So over the same 24 months, you're looking at around $48,000 of additional contribution coming into the company for the one-time sale and installation that we might be charging. Now, in the hosted scenario, it's getting commoditized. Sometimes we're discounting the installation, or we're really having to get really tight on the margin for the phones. I get all that. We could talk about that piece of it all day, but I'm assuming that we're going to sell them the equipment, and a lot of folks still are. There's other options out there that include phones from the hosted solution from the carrier. Those carry different economics as well. So that, again, we can get into a lot of different ways to skin this cat. But if we sell these phones, we're going to look at maybe putting another $2,000 a month to our bottom line in the contribution line. Same idea here is, what are we going to do if we do a wholesale solution and we can do the same thing, roughly 50 seats a month, but selling it from a wholesale perspective, kind of running some basic numbers. We would have then top line sales per month of $950. We would get a commission on the SIP trunks of $60 a month. So we have a fairly high monthly incoming. And again, that represents just a couple of customers, same 50 seats. And then we have to make an allowance for seat cost. We might have a billing fee if we're using the unified billing service that Clearfly offers. As we end up with a monthly gross of about $438. After 24 months, you've got a recurring run rate of $10,000 and change per month, or about $130,000 annual gross margin from coming in from these sales, about $130,000. And again, I'm going to say the same thing, which is it's virtually cost-free recurring margin. Plus, you're going to have the same rough $48,000 of installation contribution after you pay for the equipment and after you pay for the cost to install that equipment and maybe a small sales commission. You should have roughly $48,000 in your pocket after that's all said and done. Last question here, last slide here, and then we'll get some questions out there. To recap, this is a way to be laser focused on building recurring revenue streams from every source that's reasonable to do so. SIP, when it's sold with hosted on a wholesale basis, is going to generate commissions. You're going to sell your hosted solution to your customer. Maybe you buy the SIP wholesale from the provider, or the provider just bills for the SIP trunkage directly. Then you're going to have a SIP commission to bring in. For hosted voice, sold via a commissionable retail solution where you get a commission on the back end, or if you sell it as a wholesale product, all of these create this long-term, low-touch recurring revenues. When you pair that with the other ones that we're doing, where we're selling partner plans on the premise side, we're selling potentially CTAP maintenance agreements on surveillance and security from time to time, and our elephant in the room, we're selling IT solutions and managed services to our customers as well. You have recurring revenue coming from multiple sources. That's how we get there. That's how we kind of approach that nirvana stage. We get there quicker, we get there more profitably, And once we hit that stage where we've got recurring revenues covering all the costs in the business, that's when we really see everything become a lot more profitable. That's when we see folks that are making 10 or 12% EBITDA in 1 year go to 17 or 18. One more year, they're at 23, 22, 24. So instead of growing a point or two of profitability a year, when you really hit your inflection point with recurring revenue, dang, all of a sudden people are growing their profit margins by 50% a year. It seems just like that. So that's what we're always looking for. That's what core recurring revenues mean to you and mean to your profitability. Now, next week, we're going to talk about some security, security as a service. We're going to talk about SD-WAN and what we can do to incorporate those into our offerings, and it'll be similar. And then again, following session right after the holidays is going to be our dive into IT. So anyway, I know that's a lot of information for you. Any questions before we wrap up today? None. All right. Either I put you to sleep or I'm so good at explaining that nobody could possibly have a single question. I'm going to think it's the latter.
Tim, great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. All right. Well, as always, if you think of any questions after the fact here, if you go back, or if any of you are selling a different solution, a little bit different structure, and you want to ask questions of, hey, here's how we do it, here's why we do it that way, and you want to kind of go through that, I want to encourage all of you, reach out to me offline, drop me an email, or we can set up a 15 or 30-minute call to kind of talk about what your options are and what you're looking to do. I'm always available for those questions after we finish these sessions. So thank you very much. And see you guys next Thursday.
Thank you, Tim.
All righty, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys. Bye.